What do you think about Mackenzie Phillips' admission that she had an incestuous relationship with her father, John Phillips of the Mamas and the Papas? Do you believe her, or are you skeptical about her claims? Will it help other victims of incest to come forward? We'll tackle the disturbing topic of incest right now on It's Your Call. It was a shocker, even by Hollywood standards. Mackenzie Phillips, the adorable rebel many of us grew up with on One Day at a Time, admitting that she had an incestuous relationship with her famous father. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Lynn Doyle. Our topic today is one that isn't often discussed because it's just too disturbing. Some might even say too sick for most of us even to consider. Yet incest, which is defined by Webster's dictionary as, quote, sexual intercourse between persons so closely related that they are forbidden by law to marry, is happening more frequently than perhaps we want to acknowledge. According to the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, 73% of sexual assaults like the ones reported by Mackenzie Phillips are committed by someone known to the victim. 28% by someone intimate to them, and 7% by a family member. Now, Phillips says that she was raped by her father while they were both high on drugs, but that over time the encounters became consensual. Experts say that's not unusual. What is unusual is talking about incest and actually admitting it. That's exactly what our brave women who are here with us in the studio today have decided to do. Jessica was sexually abused by her maternal uncle from the ages of about 4 until she was about 10 or so. She had a mini breakdown when she was 19 while in a women's studies class in college. She told her mother and started therapy. And as a result, she is now a member of the Speakers Bureau for RAIN, the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network. Also with us is Linda, who was molested by her father from approximately 10 until 16 years of age. Her abuse culminated with an emergency C-section on her 16th birthday. It was her father's baby. Many people in the small town where she lived knew what was going on, but they did nothing. She did not admit to anything until she was about 18. She, too, is now a member of the Speakers Bureau for RAIN, the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network. We're going to hear from them in just a moment, but first, we're joined by Dr. James Pettigo, who is the medical director for the Joseph J. Peters Institute. Thank you all for agreeing to talk about this. I know it's a very difficult topic, and I know people want to hear your story, but I'd like to turn to Jim first and ask you to explain to our viewers just how frequently something like what Mackenzie Phillips has claimed actually happens.
Father-daughter incest isn't the most frequent kind of sexual assault or sexual abuse, but it does happen, and it is far more frequent than it should be. The most frequent kind is probably brother-sister incest, but that rarely gets public attention. And then uncles, stepfathers, natural fathers get involved, and when fathers are involved, as in the Mackenzie Phillips situation, often drugs, particularly alcohol, are involved. Many of these fathers who abuse like that are really tyrants, angry men who drink and who abuse their wives as well as their daughters. And about 1 out of every 3 women who grow up in the U.S. are sexually abused in some way, not necessarily with incest, but in some way. So it's a very frequent phenomenon.
When you heard Mackenzie Phillips admit that she had this relationship with her father, did you think that it was a good thing to have someone who was so high profile come out and admit it?
Oh, I think it's very helpful, because the more this gets openly talked about, the less likely it is to occur. One of the reasons it occurs as frequently as it does is that most families are very quiet about it. I was telling one of the women on the show today that in order to arrange to be here, I told one of my professional people who had to help me arrange the schedule why I was going to be here because of the Mackenzie Phillips situation, and she was incensed that she said they should let him rest. He's dead now. They should leave him in peace. She was really furious that this is going to be talked about openly. And I think there are a fair number of people like that, so that I think talking about it openly is very helpful in changing those opinions.
You know, it was interesting because I posted some questions on Facebook and MySpace to get reaction to Mackenzie Phillips' admission and her revelations. And it was surprising to me the number of people who felt that this was just another celebrity looking for yet just another angle to sell a book, and some actually doubted whether this had happened. Do victims of incest and sexual abuse sometimes face that skepticism, that cynicism?
The closer the perpetrator is in the family, the more likely that is to happen, because the perpetrator, in this case, is deceased, but in most cases isn't, and the family wants to protect the image. They also want to protect their breadwinner. And so mothers often are furious with their daughters for saying this, partly because it's so disruptive in the family, and partly because it says something about mother's relationship with the perpetrator.
Even in the Mackenzie Phillips family, I understand her siblings and her former stepmothers are divided. Some believe her wholeheartedly, and others do not.
Yeah.
And that must be adding to the survivor's guilt that she or any other victims experience.
I think one of the reasons that it's hard to believe stories like this is that when these girls grow up with their fathers, the fathers train them to be dependent, train them to need others, train them not to be self-reliant, and so when they tell the story of what happens, they don't come across as strong, healthy individuals. They come across as sort of weak, because that's the way they get raised.
Let's talk about the men who perpetrate these kinds of acts, specifically incest. Is there a specific type of individual, or is it across the board the kind of man that might commit this?
I think there are characteristics, and I think probably the most frequent one is a sense of entitlement. A man who feels like he has raised the daughter, he has paid for her, he has taken care of her mother, his wife, that he's entitled to what he wants. And particularly if alcohol is involved, after he's been drinking, the entitlement is very strong, and the women in the family just don't have rights as far as he's concerned. So I think entitlement is a strong characteristic of these men.
I want to turn to the ladies who have decided to speak out about this, because I want your reaction to Mackenzie Phillips' public revelation that she was a victim of incest. Jessica, when you first heard it, did you say, this is fantastic, now we can talk about it, or did it perhaps bring up some of those memories that you've worked so hard to get away from?
I agree with the first thing you said. I think that whether the situation is a bit sensationalized right now, but the key is that it's opened the door to a national dialogue about incest, which, you know, there's been some great personalities who have tried to kind of start this going. Oprah has talked openly about her past. But I think there's never been a national dialogue about this topic in such a public way. So question her as it may, it is incredibly difficult to come out and make this kind of allegation. I do believe in the goodness of people and think that this wouldn't be something she would fabricate. But all I can speak to today is this has really invited the conversation, and I think it's something that women are dealing with all over this country, and so I think good can come from it.
Both of you are members of the Speakers Bureau of RAINN. Why did you decide, Linda, ultimately to start to speak about your experiences?
For me, I found that it's much more therapeutic for me to speak in a group setting than I've tried individual therapy. It's never been something that's worked for me. And speaking in a more public forum with more people, I get asked more questions that help me to look inside myself, which ultimately helps me to heal even more from where I was. And it never fails whenever I speak somewhere, somebody asks me a question that I'm just, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way, thank you. And here's how I dealt with that, and thank you for asking that question. And also because I remember growing up, nobody talked about it. Nobody's whispered about it. I mean, it was You know, when a girl showed up pregnant at school and everybody knew that she didn't go out with boys or anything like that, they ultimately knew who the father was, but rather than try to be supportive, it was, you know, the whisper kind of thing.
And you actually were a victim of that yourself.
Correct.
Because the way that your situation came to light is that you actually